We have Darren Meyer up next. Darren and I work together at Veracode, and so it's going to be awesome, I'm sure. He'll talk to you about reality checking your security testing program, drawing on experiences that he's had both as a trainer and as a developer and a security practitioner at a large retailer. So here you go, Darren.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you being willing to admit you work with me. That's high praise. So when I first had the idea of talking to this group, I looked back at the experience that I've had over about the last 9 years in security and the 6 years before that when I was a professional software developer, and I said, I'm starting to see some patterns. And I've had a chance to talk to dozens of people around the world who've tried different things, who've tried different approaches to security testing, who've struggled with the conversion from traditional development models, the waterfall approach, to trying to become agile or lean or trying to implement DevOps. And what I realized is all of the challenges that I was hearing from these various people kind of boiled down into the same general patterns. And when I was faced with trying to implement a security testing program at a Fortune 50 company in a very short period of time, I got kind of on the ground experience of, there are things that don't work, and a lot of it has to do with some misconceptions that we as an industry tend to have about the business of software development. I'm curious, how many people in here have done software development professionally as part of their job? Anybody? Excellent. How many of you have security as one of the main things that you do now for your job? And how many of you are managers? A couple. Excellent. Okay. So that's good. You won't be too surprised about the business of software development stuff, which that's progress. How did you get your security testing program? How did you justify it? I know how I justified it. There's one simple word. Compliance. Well, probably is compliance, right? Most for me. PCI came in and said you have to have a security testing program. Or a HIPAA assessor comes in and says you have to have a security testing program. Some kind of QSA. And, people are afraid. They don't want to have a compliance issue. They don't want to be hacked. So if you're going to do a security testing program, you should probably do a good job, right? But without the compliance justification, you probably wouldn't have one at all. Unfortunately, that means there are things that you probably did not consider. Right? And the number one thing is agility. Right? And when I say agility, I don't necessarily mean the same thing as what an Agile practitioner means. When I say agility, I mean the ability to move from I have an idea to I have a product shipped to market in a very short period of time. Right? And companies try to solve the agility problem in all kinds of different ways, at least when it comes to software. Some of it is implementing things like Agile and Lean and DevOps, or at least pretending to, right? And some of it is trying to remove roadblocks in more traditional models, right? Make it easier to get funding, for example. Or say, hey, we're going to have centers of excellence, right? All of these approaches to developing software are really designed to increase agility, decrease time to market. Whether your product is software or whether your software is supporting some other product or business function, you still have this concern. And chances are when you designed your security testing program, you didn't really have you didn't really have agility as a core value. And there's usually three reasons for that. Either you just didn't know to think about it, right? It just wasn't on the roadmap at all. Or it was, but you had no idea how to approach it, so you decided, we'll figure that out later. Or it was, and you had some ideas about how to approach it, but someone in management or someone with money said, no, you are not allowed to think about this right now. We need you to ship your program and get it running. Right? The problem is, though, if your security testing program cannot add value to the developers without significantly impacting agility, people are just going to do what people do. They're going to find a way around it. Right? They're going to find ways not to participate. They're going to find ways to not have all of their app tested. This is something I struggled with in my past, where developers would say, here, we'll send you our core app, and we'll put it into Fortify and we'll let it get tested, but we're not going to tell you about all the middleware and other little pieces that we wrote around it because we're worried that you're going to find problems and it's going to slow us down. Right? Another key component of agility, though, is process. Right? How much time did you spend, those of you who have implemented a security program, how much time did you spend designing the process for how developers and how project managers and how build masters are actually engaging with security testing, submitting tests, getting results? Anybody? weeks, right? That's good. The most common answer I got was, oh, we talked about it a couple of times, right? It's a big problem. The process is really important because if your non-security people can't understand what's required of them based on how big or how scary or how compliancy their project is, guess what? They're not going to participate. And if you don't have the participation of the people that you're testing, your program is most likely going to fail. And so your project managers and your people managers especially, but your developers as well, need to have an understanding of what's required of them to participate in your security testing program. Another thing you probably didn't consider was program elasticity, right? We have a security testing program. It's for our biggest, most critical apps, right? Because those are the ones that usually have the compliance impact. Flagship product, whatever. What about small teams? If you spend $1 million on a $30 million project for security, that's not too bad, right? That's less than 10% of the project cost. You can probably sell that pretty well. If I have a $30,000 development project, and security comes along and says, I want to spend 10 grand to test it, now it's a $40,000 project and a quarter of my budget is security. That's not going to go over too well, right? So how do you scale down to those things? Does your program scale to differing levels of risk? What about different costs, right? What about non-standard technology stacks? Right? If your scanning tool does Java and C#, what happens if somebody decides to write something in Rust or Golang, right? Do you have any idea how to deal with that? Your automated tools probably won't handle it. None of the major players do. What are you going to do? Are you going to test it or are you going to not test it? Do they require an exception? Right? Did you design these things in? What about third-party components? Hey, we built our web app on Hibernate. Good choice. Hibernate's great software. How secure is it? Did you test it? What about stuff you buy? Oh, we're going to do some message passing. We're going to use MQ. I won't say MQ is a good product because I've had too many run-ins with it, but it's a perfectly reasonable choice, right? MQ is great. How secure is it? How do you know? Are you trusting IBM? Or is there some neutral third party that says that it's good enough for you? What's good enough? You know, are you assessing them or are you testing them? Right? And then the last thing, of course, is discovery. How do you even know what you have? Right? When you first built a security testing program, good chances are it was for a handful of apps that were well-defined, they were already in process, they may already be in production, and you were just, worried about testing for the maintenance process and testing what's already in place. But what about new projects? How do you find out? Do you wait for people to engage you? Can you find people if they go out and buy a Dropbox account and then build an app around it? Do you know about the Dropbox component? Because let me tell you, marketing is going out and doing this all the time, especially if you have a big organization. Right? Your sales team went out and bought a Salesforce subscription and they never asked IT. This is the big promise of cloud for a lot of business organizations, is they don't have to involve IT, which means probably they're not involving security either. But there's a reason that we didn't consider these things. This isn't just a checklist of stuff you should have thought about or that you should think about if you're going forward. These things are based on having a really fundamental misunderstanding or a set of misbeliefs that we have. And so really what I want to spend time on today is doing a little bit of a reality check. And the first piece of that is we tend to think of security as defense, right? And we tend to think that because a lot of us, grew up in military background or in network security background, and we have the language of defense, right? We have to put a firewall in, we have to prevent, we have to protect, we have to defend against opponents, attackers, people who want to hurt us. And that's true to a certain extent, but when it comes to application security, and especially when you take on the testing role, security is a quality function, right? Just like everything else, right? You got performance to worry about, you've got scalability to worry about, right? It's a quality function. We're on the same side as the developers. We don't need to have the antagonistic relationship with development that a lot of security teams have. Your goal isn't to catch them doing something wrong. Your goal is the same as every other quality team, which is we want to ship quality software, right? You don't want to ship a turd. The thing that you care about is shipping something that's not unsafe for your customers' data, for your organization's data, for the controls, for the systems that you're trying to protect. But that's a quality function, right? Now, the nice thing about making that change is that, like every other quality function, developers need to have a base level of knowledge, right? No developer needs to be a usability expert. No developer needs to be a performance engineer. No developer needs to be, a scalability engineer. But you know what? They need to know a little bit about those areas because they need to know what are the good patterns and when am I in over my head, right? When do I need to go get the help of an expert, right? And so if you align yourself with the quality position and say, hey, security is a quality function, now you can start to make a case for let's give developers training, not the kind of training that gives all of your developers a certified ethical hacker certificate, because that's silly. You're not going to turn them into security experts. If they wanted to be, they would do it on their own. Right? A lot of you were developers before. How did you get into security? You were interested and you studied, formally or informally. Right? If your developers were interested at that level, they would already do it on their own. You don't need to turn them into experts. We also have a tendency, because we're not quality people, there's still waterfall in your organization even if you're agile, and it goes in your process to market. Software development always kind of looks like this, right? Somebody has an idea, you have to go through some kind of process to get resources to develop the idea. Sometimes that's easy, sometimes that's hard. You have to do some kind of requirements gathering, right? Even if you're doing agile, there's still sprint 0, right? You still have to get some basic requirements. There's a build and test cycle, where you try to build something that works. And then there's the thing that we usually call test, which is actually certification. And I include deployment in certification because you're not done with certification until you say it's deployed and it's working in production, right? And that's usually where we put security testing, right? Right before we go to production, we say, hey, we've entered QA or we've entered test, and now we're going to put some security testing in place and make sure that we don't ship something that's horribly insecure. Well, how does that work, right? You start out with this much time planned for quality assurance, and what happens to it? It shrinks, because development always takes longer than you plan, right? So you get to this end testing, and you say, oh, I want to add security testing in here. What's the chances you're going to get the ship date to slip? No, what you're going to get is people accepting more risk than they might otherwise have done. They're going to look at a whole lot of your test results and say, I'm not going to fix that. Which, by the way, having security bugs that you say you're not going to fix, that's okay, right? One of the things to think about, if security is quality, then a security defect is just a defect. And if it's a defect, then it gets prioritization. Do you fix every defect you find? No, nobody has time for that. Right? That's core to the Agile methodology, right? Once it doesn't return any business value, you stop. Same thing with security things, they go on the backlog, they go in your bug tracking system, and once there's not enough value returned by fixing them, you stop. Right? Better place to put your security testing as a result of that is here, build and test, right? If you're doing continuous integration, that means your IDE better have a plugin, right? There needs to be a way for your developers to submit what they're writing to your security testing tools to get at least some level of feedback before it goes into the continuous integration environment, right? Before they're pushing up their changes. If you're doing a nightly build, which a lot of people still are, even if you're doing Agile, then automate the build, right? It builds, it submits it for testing, and it streamlines those results back into something, right, where it can be tracked. Security cannot just be a gate, right? If you try to get in people's way and say, hey, you have to pass our test before we let you do production, that's great, you still kind of have to do that, but if you didn't help them before that, what are people going to do? They're going to find a way around it, right? This is the basic psychology of development. As a developer, I know what I always did. I did the simplest thing I thought I could get away with because I had a stack of work this tall. Security people come to me and say, I'm going to add to your stack of work. Okay, I'm willing to let you do that, but you better give me some help. You better give me things that are testable, right? Which, leads to another discussion. Is your organization actually agile? Have you trusted the claims of the developers when they say, oh, hey, we're lean, or hey, we're agile, we're totally doing DevOps, right? For 80%, how many of you in your organizations are primarily some kind of agile methodology? Okay. 80% of you are wrong. No, you're not. Right? You're using agile terms. You might be doing some of the activities, right? But you're still doing some kind of traditional waterfall-like development process. My favorite of which is we do waterfall every 30 days. I call it recirculating fountain development. Right? And there's some things that you can look for to find out if you're actually agile, if you're actually lean, or if you're just fragile, right? One of those is documentation being produced at all? If the answer is no documentation is being produced, then someone has deeply misunderstood Agile, which says you do less documentation, not zero, right? Are developers saying, oh, no, we don't build test suites, right? That was always the jaw dropper for me, because unit testing and unit testing coverage is a really important part of agility. And all of the Agile and Lean and DevOps, like, you'll hear people hammer on unit tests. So if they're saying, oh, we don't do that, well, then you're not doing Agile, right? You're relying on some external function for your quality. And it's not necessarily bad, but when you're designing your program, you'd better understand that that's happening, right? Because if there are no unit tests, you can't build security unit tests that will actually get run, right? Or my favorite is, we don't really sit down and talk to all of our stakeholders, right? We have the one customer representative, and we talk to them, but we're Agile, so we don't have time to talk to security. Well, guess what? We're a stakeholder, right? If they're not talking to us, if there's not somebody who's on the development team, even though they might be on, as the security folks, I mean, I worked with, hundreds of developers, and there were 3 AppSec folks, so it's not like we were dedicated to a project. We were on 15 projects, and that's okay. But you're a stakeholder, and if your developers are not sitting down and talking to you, then they're not doing Agile, right? You can't just use these terms to avoid listening to undesirable stakeholders, right? That doesn't work. Right? Another good thing to look for, are there actually story points? Right? A lot of people will say, oh, we have Agile, and we have a backlog. And on the backlog, what you see is a task list with no prioritization whatsoever. There's no story points, there's no business value. Well, how are you going to put security defects on that backlog and expect them to get priority if they're not prioritizing tasks? Right? What they created was a really lightweight bug tracker, which again, isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you better know it when you design your program. Right? So for the other 20% of you, if you really are doing Agile, or you really are doing Lean, or you really are doing DevOps, what role do you take? Are you a customer? How many people think customer? No? Good. First time I've asked that question, had nobody raise their hand. I had one guy who's actually right. He's like, well, we're RSA, so yeah, kind of customer. Fair point. Most of the time, no. You're QA or your operations, or you got kind of a foot in both camps. Right? Your concern is shipping a quality product and making sure that it stays a quality product once it gets into operations. By the way, you are not a special and unique snowflake. This was a theme that I've discovered over and over again, and it was frustrating because I was under NDA when I talked to most of the people who've implemented these programs. And so I would hear people go, oh, we have this problem, our developers, they don't want to participate in the program. We can't possibly find all the cross-site request forgery bugs, because a lot of them we have to allow, because without it, we can't deep link to search results, so we can't use CDNs, right? We have this big problem, and we don't know what to do because nobody's ever had this problem before. And I would hear it again and again and again. And I was ripping my hair out because I couldn't say, actually, yes, this guy and that guy and that guy and that guy, they all have this problem. Right? Security happens in a community. Most of the problems that you will face with testing, most of the problems you will face with security in general, are the same problems that everybody else faces, or they're so similar that the difference doesn't really matter, right? Because you can use the same class of solution. It goes further than just security, by the way. Manufacturing, finance, materials handling, right? These organizations have solved many of the same class of problems we have, and we can't keep refusing to learn from them, right? Financial services, they know how to manage risk. It's a little different, but it's about 95% the same. Manufacturing knows how to deal with agility. Right? They've been doing it for 100 years. Do we pay attention? Sometimes. Right? Not frequently enough. We have to learn, and we have to teach. Right? If you're one of the organizations that thinks, hey, look, I think we're one of the best at doing application security, I think we have a great security testing program, then I want to see you up here at a conference, telling other people how you did it. Right? Share that information, help people, look for people who need help, reach out to them. If you're one of the people who says, I have no idea how I'm doing this, ask for help. And so often what I'll hear is, but I'm under NDA, or I'm not allowed to talk about the details of organization. Fair enough. Wouldn't want anyone to get in trouble with the lawyers. I wouldn't want anyone to reveal intellectual property that they can't reveal. But you would be surprised how much of your security problems you can talk about without talking about anything sensitive. Right? Ask for help. People have the same problems. And that feeds into, I'm going to say it again, security is quality. Right? If your goal is to ship the best quality product that you can, Right? Remember, nothing's ever 100% quality, and not everybody needs 100% quality or the best quality ever. It's the best quality you can with the resources you have. How many of you drive a Bentley? Right? Nobody. How many of you drive like a Toyota or a Honda? Something in that class. Right? Most of you. Why? You don't need a Bentley. It's not worth it to spend that much money. Is your Honda lower quality? Yeah, probably. It was not hand-built lovingly, but that's what you needed. It doesn't have to be perfect. Same with software, and security is one of those attributes. And by the way, I never, ever, ever want to hear one of my fellow AppSec professionals ever say developers don't care about security. You will get a rant or an internet slap for that from me, because yeah, we do. We care a lot about security. Every single one of your developers, even if they say, "Oh, I don't care about security," if you talk to them for about 10 minutes, you'll find out they actually do care at some level, right? They'll say, "Oh, I don't care about security," but they have a different idea in their head about what security is than you do. And so if you say, "Well, do you think it's important to, keep credit card numbers from falling into the wrong hands, or you think it's important to protect people's email addresses?" Well, yeah, of course. So they do care. The problem is they also care about all this other stuff, right? They have a ton on their plate. They've got to worry about performance and scalability and maintainability and time to market, and somebody breathing down their neck about whether they're shipping or this weird bug that QA found that nobody can replicate. Right? They've got a lot on their mind. So really what we're saying when we say, "Oh, developers don't care about security," is we haven't figured out how to give them security requirements in a way that they can understand. They need to be clear and they need to be testable. If I can't test your requirement, you get no priority. Right? And so such things as, if I see another authentication requirements document that has 150 things about exactly how to hash passwords, I'm going to scream, because for most organizations, your authentication requirements should be like, "Hey, we have AD, please use AD." Or, "Hey, we have LDAP, please use LDAP." Or, "Hey, we wrote this nice little module for you, just use that, you'll be good." Right? That's what your security requirement should look like. You can test that. Developer can wrap their head around that. They can write a unit test for that. They can make sure it happens. Right? So, how do we actually make the change? Right? So, okay, we've examined our misconceptions a little bit. Kind of corrected some ideas, sat down, and what do we do now, right? We can't just go and overhaul our security testing program, I think, right? If one of you works somewhere where you can just overhaul your security testing program because you heard some guy speak at a conference, I want to talk to you, because that'd be an awesome job. Right? We can start by doing actual quality assurance and not just quality control. Anyone know the difference between quality control and quality assurance? It's very old. This actually came from manufacturing, right? Quality control exists to prevent you from shipping a turd, right? You get to the end of the assembly line and you say, you test the object and you say, "We can send this out to our customers or we can't," right? Because if you send it out to your customers, it's very expensive to get returns and deal with angry customers and deal with lawsuits, and manufacturing has strict product liability, so if there's a flaw, it doesn't even matter if they were negligent, they can still get sued. Right? So they put quality control in place like a couple hundred years ago, right? The idea of quality control. And then people realize very quickly that it's still pretty expensive to wait until something rolls off the line to figure out if you made something that sucks. So we came up with this idea of quality assurance, which, where control prevents you from shipping the turd, quality assurance prevents you from making it in the first place, right? Because you detect the problems much earlier. Quality assurance says there needs to be quality activities from the moment you have an idea about what to do all the way down to the moment you do quality control, so that by the time you get to quality control, there shouldn't be any surprises. Right? Ideally, when quality assurance is working, you get to that control point, you get to that certification test, and it's there just as a safety net in case something didn't work and you don't find any problems or any problems that prevent you from shipping anywhere. Right? And the whole idea of quality assurance is predicated on something that comes up in Agile a lot too, which is perfect is the enemy of good. Right? I've seen way too many testing programs that start with, okay, we bought Fortify, we contracted with Veracode, we're going to lock it down, we're going to test, we're going to find all of the problems that we have, and we're going to make the developers fix them. How effective do you think that is? It doesn't work, right? It doesn't work at all. It's overwhelming. If everything's critical, nothing is. And the reality is you're not ever going to have perfect security, so stop. Right? We're spending way too much effort chasing down things that we'll probably never fix. right? We're spending way too much chasing down things without understanding of the context in which it's going to happen. Right? We do not need to spend $50,000 correcting cross-site scripting in a tool that 2 marketing people use to update the website. Right? We don't need to do that. That's silly. Right? And especially when you mitigate it and you find out that they really want to upload JavaScript because they're marketing people. Right? So how do we improve process agility? Right? First piece of advice, I just get a little bit of a confused look on. Go to developer users groups. How does that help security testing be more agile? Who do you think knows where the pain points are in your security testing program? It ain't you. Or otherwise you wouldn't be in this room. You're like, I already know that. Right? Certainly not your project managers. It's not your management. It's not developer management. It's the people who participate, right? It's the developers. They know where the pain points are. They know what's causing them trouble. Go sit and learn how development really happens at your organization. Don't talk, don't ask questions, don't try to jump in and talk to developers about security. Just go and listen. You will walk out of a users group meeting or a design meeting or whatever group of developers opportunity that you get a chance to sit in, and I guarantee you will have at least 2 ideas on how to improve your testing program and make it easier for the developers to use. Right? Second thing, simplify your security requirements. If you can't explain to a developer in a couple of seconds what the security requirement means and give them an idea on how they could test for it, it's too complex. Right? If they can't understand it, they have no hope of understanding what they're going to be tested against. And what ends up happening is your test results out of your program come back to the developer and they seem completely arbitrary and capricious. Right? And that adds to this natural animosity. These security guys are just trying to screw me over and make my job harder. None of this makes any sense. Right? How can you expect someone to perform well against a measurement if they don't even understand the measurement? And of course, security champions. Right? Any talk you hear about Agile security will usually talk about how important it is to have security champions in your organization. And if you have support to do that formally from management, great, formal program is the way to go. If you don't, do not just throw up your hands and say, oh, management didn't approve a security champion program, I guess I'm done. We're just going to have to work around it. Well, I mean, come on, you guys are hackers. Go hack it. Find the people, there are developers who get security a little bit better than other developers, who care about it a little bit more. Go find them, go talk to them, help them understand where you're coming from, what your goals are. Get their help. Show them that you'll help them, that you'll provide an ear, that they can come talk to you. Right? You're going to build security champions even if it's not a formal program. And of course, automate. Right? If you're not automating your testing, then people are going to forget to do it. Even well-intentioned people are going to forget to do it because they're trying to ship software as fast as they can. Think smaller, speed up. Part of that's automation. Part of that is make sure that you go from code is submitted to test to the developers have usable results in hours, not days. Right? If I'm a developer and I really want to participate in security testing, the best way that you can help me do that is to make sure I can do it every day. Right? Make sure that when you go renew your license for whatever testing tools you use that they support, not charging an arm and a leg for testing the same application over and over. Right? All the major vendors have some kind of per application or per developer licensing scheme. Make sure you're on it. And you don't want to add cost unnecessarily. Build reduced policies. What do I do for an application that tells me when people's birthdays are? Right? Maybe I only care about the OS top 10 for that. Maybe not even that. Right? I certainly care about it less than I do about an e-commerce site that's going to be exposed to millions of users on the internet. It's a different attack surface, right? I'm going to care a lot more about certain things. Right? Criticality of things needs to change. And you need to have about a 15-minute onboarding process. Right? You need to know which policy set you're going to apply to a given application with a 15-minute conversation with the developers. If you can't, you need to spend some time simplifying. You don't need to do it all at once. You can do Kaizen, right? Find a way to make it shorter and shorter and shorter until you get to that 15-minute objective. Right? And finally, help. Don't just criticize. Coming up to a developer and saying, you use base 64, what are you, stupid? That's not helpful. I mean, save the ranting for Twitter. That's fine. Base64 encryption it always makes me laugh anyway. But, taking it on the developers is not going to help you at all. If you come to someone and say, hey, I know your project is only going to be 2 sprints long. I know your project's only 10 grand. I'm here to help make sure there are no surprises and that you have everything that you need to make sure that you can do the security testing and meet the security requirements. I'm here to help. You're going to do a lot better than you say, hey, I'm here to review your work and tell you what you did wrong. Right? That feeds into that. This is a quality-minded approach. And of course, you're going to see this theme here, automate, right? The less time that the individuals on a project have to commit to participating in the security testing program, the more willing they're going to be to help you out, the more willing they're going to be to not hide their projects from you. Right? So how do you verify third parties then? Right? So far we've talked about how to improve processes inside. What happens when people decide that they're going to, oh, hey, we're going to host this whole thing on EC2 and we're going to, buy this platform and we're going to use MailChimp for mail and we're going to use Google Docs to store documents and generate PDFs. Right? What are you going to do about that? Right? Well, it doesn't work unless you can have trusted, neutral verification. Right? You hire somebody, you hire a consultant, you hire a Veracode, you hire a Verizon, somebody who your vendor, your provider, your partner can trust and that you can trust. And you get a summary. Hey, they score 85 out of 100. Hey, they score 5 stars, whatever the system they're using, right? And the vendor gets a laundry list, right? They understand everything that's wrong with their application now, and they can fix it enough to meet what your objectives are. It's a great thing to do during contract negotiation if you can. The important change here is you have to actually test, not just assess. Right? It's great if you have all of your vendors go fill out COBIT. Right? I'm not going to tell you to stop doing that, but security assessments of vendor assessments are kind of BS. Let's be honest. You're basically asking people. You're turning into an auditor. You're asking people, do you do this? And can you show me some evidence that you do it? And then you're trusting that they do a good job. Right? Do you have all of your code done with static analysis? Absolutely. I have never seen an assessor go, well, do you fix the problems that you find? Right? How quickly? What's your turnaround time? How do you prioritize? Right? Those are questions we can't really ask. No one's going to share that with you. So if we test their stuff, we get a much better result. Because if you turn into an auditor, you know the old joke. Auditor walks into a bar, says, hey, you guys have beer here? And the bartender kind of looks at the taps and goes, yeah. Auditor pulls out her checkbox, checks the box, walks out of the bar. Right? That's what we're turning into as an industry when we just do assessment and we never test the product. Right? And in order for this to work, you have to make sure that your vendors and your partners see value in it too. It can't just be value for you, it has to be value for them. And the surest way to do that is to make sure that they have results that they can repeat. So if they've tested a version of the program, they should be able to share those results with other people who come asking, and that they get usable information in partnership from whatever third party you choose to use for this. Right? If you go hire some random little consulting shop and they do the test and they walk away, your vendors aren't going to get a whole lot of value. If you hire somebody who knows what they're doing, they're going to do the assessment and they're going to work with the vendor to improve their quality. That has to be part of the deal. And if you're really lucky, you'll find a vendor who actually goes and reaches out to your third parties and convinces them to pay for this. That does actually happen, by the way. And of course, automate, right? The less process-oriented that you have to run with a human on this thing, the better you're going to be. Right? And then finally, improving discovery. How do we improve discovery? Easiest way I've ever seen to do this is follow the money. Most projects, I'm going to say most because we all know that skunkworks thing that ends up in production, right? That's still going to happen. Underdesk deployment has become Amazon deployment over the years. You're not going to stop that. But most projects that you care about are going to have somebody approving funding. Make sure you get in that pipeline and make sure that every time funding is approved that involves buying or building software, you at least find out about it. Right? It's a lovely thing when you can reach out to a project and say, hey, I hear you guys got your funding approved for your project. Great. When can we meet to talk about security requirements? Right? If you have a good partnership relationship, they'll be like, wow, what service? If you have a bit of an antagonistic relationship still, which you should be working to fix, but it takes time, then they're going to go, oh, crap. We can't pull anything over on these guys. They knew about it before we told them, right? And you're much more likely to get partnership and participation. Speaking of partnership, be a better partner, right? You have to be a better partner. If you by behavior and words, if you tell people on the development teams that you're testing their code so that you can help them achieve their goals, not so that you can screw them up, not so that you can be a bump in the road, then you're going to have a much better result in terms of people not trying to hide stuff from you, right? Whether that's components or whole projects. And finally, automate. Right? If you have Nessus, if you buy Veracode Discovery, if you run Nmap on a regular basis, if you have Git tools, right? Use these things to find projects that start. Right? Don't just look inside your own network, by the way. Also look on the internet. Right? One of my favorite things, I worked for US Bank for a while, and it was very fun to go do DNS searches for things that had US Bank or 5-star in the domain name or in the core URL. Just a little Google hacking, basically. And we found tons of things that we wouldn't have known about otherwise if we hadn't gone and used a tool to regularly go and find who signed up for HipChat at this organization and then built something on top of it. And the last thing that you can do with your developers and with your managers is to align their incentives. Right? Never underestimate the power of incentives. Almost all of the problems that we have in application security are the result of things either being too hard or the incentives just not being there in your organization. And the most obvious incentive is accountability. A couple examples of accountability. Do developers actually have a stake in the security of their product? Right? Do they have a seat at the table about what your security requirements are going to be? All right. Do they experience the pain when there's a breach? Right? Are they going to is their pager going to go off in the middle of the night? What about the people who are making the risk decisions? When your project manager says, hey, we're not going to fix that cross-site request forgery, right? If that becomes an entry point for an attacker, do they share the consequences or are they shielded from them? Right? So it's important that we don't protect people from consequences, but we also can't seek to punish them, right? If we walk around with a big stick all the time, that's going to be problematic. People respond much better to the carrot. Punishment doesn't really work. Reinforcement does, right? So we measure your quality, but instead of having like one customer of mine did, they had a nice big plasma display on the wall with the 10 worst security performing projects on it. How much better do you think those projects got over the 6 months they had that board? Not at all. And the developers who were on that were angry. You think those developers went, oh geez, we should talk to the projects who aren't on this board to see what they're doing differently? No, they blame security. Well, they don't understand. We have a really complicated product. I gave them a pointer and I said, why don't you try flipping that around? Why don't you put the top 5 performers on there? These are the best people. One column top 5, one column top 5 improved. Right? Because relative measures are just as important as absolute performance. Right? Within 3 months, they had tons of lower performing projects reaching out to these developers going, how did you do that? Right? Within 6 months, they had C-level executives saying, hey, we have this really nice data, let's use it to reward people. Let's use it when we calculate bonuses, let's use it when we mention people at our employee meetings and say, hey, this team's doing a really great job. Never underestimate the power of being able to say, hey, this is a really great job. The rule of thumb to follow here is criticize in private, applaud people publicly. Right? Someone does something stupid, it's going to happen. Talk to them directly. Someone does something good, shout it from the rooftops. Right? People are going to see you as a much, much, much better partner then. Right? The thing to remember here is that people don't actually fear change. That's a myth. People fear being changed. People don't like change when they feel like they don't have influence over the change that's happening. And as security people, we tend to work in a very insular way where we can go off in a corner and we build, and then we release. Release it to the world. And that's fine for some things. It's not fine for testing programs or new security requirements or any of those things that are going to affect your coworkers. Right? These people are your coworkers. They're your customer in some ways. Right? So what's the surest way to make someone feel like they have influence? Give them influence, right? So if you actually give developers a seat at the table to talk about how the program's going to work, what the requirements are going to be, what the best patterns should be, help them engineer, help them do their job, right? You're going to get a much, much more participatory development group, and you're going to get a much more relaxed attitude toward the changes that you want to implement to make your program better and to make your security posture better. And of course, the most important thing that we can do as a community is to keep talking about this. Right? We don't have this problem entirely solved. Right? This was my experiences and what I've learned from talking to many people, but it's certainly not the only experiences around. So I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and put my time and attention where my mouth is. If you want to keep having this conversation, if you're on Twitter, you can mention me or mention Reality STP. I monitor both of those things. I will help facilitate that. If you're not on Twitter, you're security people, why the hell aren't you on Twitter? Seriously. All right, there's a great community already there. Join it. Does anybody have any questions, comments? Argue with me, tell me I'm full of it.
I have a mic here if anyone wants to ask questions. Just raise your hand, please.
Oh, come on, not one person disagrees with me?
Just a comment on some of the drivers for setup compliance. In my experience, it's usually been an incident or a near miss. And the degree of investment in the security program varies greatly. It's compliance and it's do some training, run Veracode, or versus if it's an incident, then actually integrate into the process.
Right. So before the mic was on, in case anyone didn't hear that, so there are drivers other than compliance, and we do have to find them. And there's quite a bit of, I agree with you, there's quite a bit of difference between a compliance-funded project and something that says, oh, hey, there was a breach, there was an incident. Just out of curiosity, have you found it to be that an incident that happens to somebody else is much of a driver?
If the security team is able to equate that and incorporate that into the risk conversation, then yes.
Right. So it's something we should be paying attention to as an industry is when breaches happen to other people and we find out that there's some kind of application security cause in there, that's our time to go and talk to our upper management and say, hey, are we sure we would be okay in this situation? Right? We're lucky it didn't happen to us, but here's what we see. Anybody else? Questions, comments, ideas, favorite beers? No? Okay, well, I really appreciate you guys coming. I know it's late in the day. And have a great rest of the conference.